I am a 33-year-old female who is quite experienced with psychedelics. I really enjoy marijuana, LSD, mushrooms, ketamine, MDMA, 2CB, and combinations of the aforementioned substances. Prior to the experience I'm about to share, I had smoked DMT approximately 15 to 20 times, but usually out of a vape pen, which cuts me off before I can really get a blast-off dose, if you will. Some of those trips were really cool, and some were scary, but never so frightening. It turned me away from my pursuit of crystal DMT. I spent years looking for it, and 3 weeks ago, I finally found it. My husband and I bought a gram and partook in a few small trips, working up the courage to take that blast-off dose. The setup. 4 days ago, at 3 p.m., we decided it was time to try to travel to another dimension and meet these entities we keep hearing about. I invited 2 of our friends over, K and P. We used our rig to dab the DMT. P went first and blew her 40 milligram hit out immediately through her nose. According to her, she had a fun experience in which she was still able to communicate with us. Kay went next and did a smaller dose and came back 10 minutes later, sharing about all the amazing visuals she had seen and love she had felt. My husband decided to go last. So, finally, the moment I had waited for, it was my turn. My husband got the rig ready and poured in 40 milligrams of the Dimitri. I inhaled it all and laid back on the couch. Some Grammatic song was playing. I cannot remember which. As I held in the smoke, I closed my eyes and began to see hazy, dull colors and patterns. I thought to myself, this isn't really working, and let the smoke out. I started to say to my husband I needed more, but I couldn't get it out. What happened next is a bit of a blur, but this is my best recollection. All of a sudden, bright neon, elaborate patterns, spirals, and jester-like clown people filled my vision. I was already terrified and could not understand what was going on. It is difficult to find words in the English language to describe a true DMT trip, but this is the only way I can think to describe it. It felt like one of the jester creatures grabbed me from behind and then grabbed my upper lip, stretching and pulling it over my head, turning my face inside out. I found it very difficult to breathe. At this point, I was still laying down with my eyes closed. The jester then slammed me face first into the couch, then pulled me back up and tore both of my eyelids open, forcing me to take in the insane psychedelia. My husband and friends said that at one point, I bolted up to a sitting position with my eyes wide open, darting rapidly around the room. I think this coincides with the feeling of having my eyes torn open and being forced to watch this horror unfold. The words I was hearing in my head were, "You think you can play with us, little bitch?" I couldn't understand what was going on or what I had done to get treated like this. I don't even think I knew who I was, but I definitely knew something was horribly wrong. The next thing I remember is feeling like this jester had stuck jagged plastic down my throat and I was choking to death. Outwardly, my husband and friends said that I had started gagging, and this is when they became concerned. Looking back, I'm sure the taste of plastic and the harshness of the smoke is what led to this feeling, but when you are that high, you have zero ability to rationalize this. The gagging turned into me spitting all over the couch, and my husband said it looked like I was about to throw up. Instead of throwing up, I tried to stand up and began crying out, "Help!" over and over. The jester continued to choke me, and I felt like I was losing the battle. I started saying, "I can't breathe. I can't breathe." Finally, the trip began to release its grip, and I could hear voices that were familiar, but the most familiar voice I could finally hear was my own. I heard myself begging for help and asking how to breathe. My husband said I even said, "Help me, you guys," and he said that I notified him that I was coming back because I had some concept that my loved ones were there. I slowly came out of it, and as I was coming back, that jester character was surrounded by beautiful colors and patterns, and he was kind of dancing and smiling and laughing, saying, "Come again, little girl, we'll be waiting," and other eerie stuff like that. When I finally completely came to, I saw 3 very scared people surrounding me, rubbing my back, telling me I was okay and that I was safe. I had no idea why they were telling me this, and I turned to my husband and said, "What's going on? What's happening to me?" He replied, "Babe, you did DMT." I began to cry. The whole experience was only about 5 minutes, possibly less, which is short, even for DMT. It felt like a lifetime. The aftermath. It is 4 days later. The trip is very difficult to remember visually, but the feelings are not. I could still feel that jagged plastic in my throat. I'm assuming I must have burned it or something. I still feel sick to my stomach. I still feel anxiety and fear. I had to leave work early the other day and beg my husband to leave work too because I was anxious and scared and felt like the only safe place for me in this world was with him. I sincerely feel traumatized. The main entity I saw was mean. He was maniacal, taunting, violent, and aggressive. I feel like I'm on the verge of a panic attack writing this out. My takeaways. When I started this, I said I wanted to warn others, and I don't mean about the intense hallucinations or entities. I have heard of horrible trips, and I didn't know it was possible, even likely. I guess I didn't realize it could ever be that aggressive of a hallucination. But hey, it's DMT. Anything can happen when you enter that realm. I was in that entity's world, and it had its way with me. What I really want people to be mindful of is that DMT can be physically dangerous. I always heard things like, "You're so high you can't keep your eyes open and you can't move. You just lay there." Well, newsflash, I did both. And I could have hurt myself trying to stand up like that if my friends and husband had not been there. I didn't read about people almost choking or throwing up until I started to research it after my experience. And even then, there's not a lot of information on this side effect. Perhaps because it doesn't happen often, but it can happen. I would have a sitter, someone who can help you get sat back down or throw up safely. I won't ever touch this substance again, and I probably won't consume any form of psychedelic until I am able to integrate this experience. I have had 2 very solid breakthrough experiences with pharma, the heaviest lasting 4 hours, around 2 hours spent in breakthrough hyperspace, ego death, etc. After these, I had no intention of going that far again, and have been happy at sub-breakthrough doses. Previously, I have just washed down the freebase. However, this time, I took 200 milligrams freebase dissolved in vinegar, with my usual 300 milligrams of moclobamide, MAOI. I'd been easily sub-breakthrough at 170 milligrams before, so I was not expecting anything too heavy. After swallowing it down, it hit me like a brick wall within just 30 seconds, and I was yanked straight through to just whiteout, but I was filled with the most excruciating horror. It was almost instant ego death, forgetting who I was, what I was, that I existed. I find it hard to describe the way I still had thoughts without words or images. I didn't remember color, and all I knew was blinding nothingness. It was like a million lifetimes and fears were being compressed into a singularity, and I kept feeling myself being pulled into this void. I was so far beyond death. Dying or even anything existing seemed utterly trivial. It is like I had been brought far beyond death, that I should have died long before this depth, but hadn't. The worst part was that there were no relationships between anything, because there was no longer anything, so there could be no reality. My brain was unable to comprehend and function, since there was no references between anything, because there wasn't anything. The The only recollection I really have is a sense of absolute hellish anguish that being in this hellscape outside of time just cannot happen to me. As anyone who has had DMT breakthrough experiences knows that there is just no cognitive rationalizing, and there is only forced surrender to the uncontrollable. At some point, something triggered some minute feeling of familiarity or recall. In tiny fragments, I started piecing abstract things together, and finally, bits of reality and myself back. It took a huge effort to do so. I was very worried I would forget myself, so I couldn't come back as me, or never actually get back, as I kept getting sucked back down into the thought loop whirlpools, then re-finding the moment I noticed a connection and be present again. As soon as I had some handle on things, I took 50 milligrams of Seroquel to try and knock the rest of it on the head and get back to normality as soon as I could. What was so odd to me was that as soon as I was aware of my physical body, my heart rate was totally calm. I wasn't sweating, agitated, or even tired. Afterwards, and the next day, I felt totally fine. It happened so fast and was so far away from any connection to reality. I just have no real emotional reaction to it at all. I'm guessing the freebase is quite tough to absorb, so the onset is slower, duration longer, and peak isn't as intense, while the acetate is absorbed very readily, which is what caused the overdose. I should have thought more about this, but I paid the price. Be careful out there. Hey guys, it's the Trip Keeper here. Be sure to like this video and subscribe if you haven't already. Turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any future upload. And I'm telling this to every single one of you. You better do it, okay? I'm coming after you. You think I'm playing? I'm coming. I'm gonna leave right now. I'm going. You see me, I'm gonna walk out the door. Seriously, alright. I'm coming to get you. You better fucking like that shit. I'm coming for ya! First of all, I want to say that I'm very familiar to DMT, so this experience came as quite a shock to me. I had been experimenting with ketamine and DMT a lot this last week, working on a project about music and hypnotic programming. For the record, I have only had the best, most magical experiences with that combination. I do a lot of mind research and brain programming, so I'm very familiar with the underworld, as I like to call it. I had a very unhealthy day as far as lots of sugar, smoking, and coffee, which normally I don't do. I'm actually very healthy, but I was going into a heavy workload and was just being lazy and unhealthy in a temporary cycle, but somehow I knew I was pushing my limits as far as the programming was going, about 30 trips in a few days. I believe I was getting careless as for the experiences were concerned, because I was doing things like not cleaning my bowl and was smoking DMT on top of old DMT. I don't know exactly what triggered this scary experience, but this is how it went. I felt it coming on very quickly. Normally, it takes 3 or 4 hits, but this one came on quickly, about 2 inhales. Visuals became active, then it was instant. 2 powerful wires crossed and short-circuited everything. And instantly, I knew something went wrong, and it was very bad. I was left in a space where I unintentionally short-circuited everything. It was the exact feeling I believe if you were playing with a loaded gun and accidentally shot and killed someone in front of you. Everything was dead. I knew it. Nothing worked. Everything was fried and broken. All the other entities were all shaking their heads angrily at me, and I found myself in this world alone, with the most alone feeling one could imagine. It was like all life was gone, no energy, just pure emptiness. The non-human things that were half alive were all blaming me. Humans were gone, everyone I loved disappeared, and I was left in this broken, empty world, all alone. I called out loud to my wife several times, but there was only silence. Nothing was there. I was seriously freaking out because this world looked exactly like where I lived, except everything was fried and burned. I was saying out loud, "I'm sorry, all I was trying to do was good." But it was too late. The damage was done. Somehow, my carelessness caused it all. I was alone. Everything was broken. My computer looked broken and sad. Lights were dim and barely alive, and there was this low draining hum of a sound. I was consciously trying to recreate good positive thoughts to bring back my world, but it was over and I knew it. I was sitting by my desk, saying out loud, "I'm sorry." I had a thought that maybe if I just reset the breaker to the house, that everything would come to life again. But when I went outside, all the landscape, plants, and the earth was burnt. There was no life. I saw someone or something walking down the street and called out to it, but it was like a walking zombie. It didn't even hear me when I called out hello. It just kept on walking. I don't know if there was even a person, but it was on my street. I was calling out to pure emptiness. I don't know what happened, but it was like an atom bomb went off and everything was burnt and dead. I went back into my room empty, feeling sad and lonely. Even my dogs were gone, and the only thing I felt I could do was lay down on my burnt bed and go to sleep to disappear. As I went to lay down, even the pillow was growling at me. I lay down for a moment, and then I opened my eyes, and my wife was there. I was so thankful, as my normal reality seemed to be coming back. She said my face was white, and my heart was beating super fast. All I can say was that was the craziest and scariest trip ever. It was so real to me, and I've done easily over 100 trips. So these are my thoughts about this. Did this trip happen because I had a super unhealthy day by smoking, consuming a lot of sugar and coffee? Could that have ignited that effect? Or maybe mixing DMT with older burnt DMT? Or maybe being a little overrun lately? Any insight would be nice. I found it interesting that when I was coming back, all that was going off in my head was that this is your lesson for smoking cigarettes. I will still explore just to get over any residual fear, but from now on, I will enter the space very healthy and respectful. I will never take DMT for granted again because it kicked my ass. It scared the bejesus out of me. I'm just glad to be back alive with my loved ones. This is an experience of smoking DMT while on the plateau and the come down from methadone. The methadone was nice, empathetic, euphoric, and stimulating. I had smoked a bunch of strong weed as well and drank a little wine. I decided to smoke some DMT. I tried a few times, but without too much success. I only managed to vaporize a little and had mild but interesting trips. They were not unpleasant, although on one occasion I did see a lizard alien type creature amid the closed-eye hallucinations. I have seen them before, and though I think it is rather superstitious of me, it always slightly alarms me. For the most part, however, these experiences were slightly euphoric, transcendent, and pleasant. But emboldened by the methadone, I thought that just wasn't enough. I put about 60 milligrams of DMT into the bowl of my bong on top of some weed, and vaporized most or all of it in 2 big hits. The high-dose DMT experience is utterly different than a moderate or low-dose experience for me. I crossed a threshold. My field of vision contemplated an empty black space in the center with morphing 3-dimensional geometric shapes gyrating on both sides. I remembered the high-dose DMT space, and the fact that it transforms reality into something completely unrecognizable, though not necessarily beautiful or transcendent. In fact, for me, it is more likely to be colorful, but somewhat flat, machine-like, and even cartoonish. I realized I was tripping extra hard, and that the experience was about to just take over completely. For just a second, I wondered if this was going to be a breakthrough. I then felt myself being propelled forward at astonishing speed. However, I could tell that I was being propelled towards something I might not want to experience at all. My resistance and fear took hold. Within less than a second, I saw my destination. It was the DMT Spirit, personified as a female demoness. I had met her before, only once, on my first ever DMT experience, in which she welcomed me and told me that she was the Queen of Spice. As I looked into her face with horror, her voice told me, "Welcome to your nightmare." With a rush, I was being sucked down into an experience that I had created for myself, or that the DMT entity had created for me. It was going to be my ultimate nightmare, tailor-made just for me. It looked like it was going to have a prosaic real-world theme, being tortured or something unpleasant, but transformed and reconfigured into the machine-like fractalizing cinematic totality of the high-dose DMT experience. Something within me revolted. I used my fear and willpower to direct myself away from the nightmare tunnel. I cleared an empty space for myself in my consciousness and told the DMT entity or entities that I would not submit to this, that I had not come into their space for this experience, and that I sought higher goals. Truth, not nightmare scenarios fractalized and engineered by hostile entities. Transcendence, not a sci-fi DMT horror show. I could now see a male DMT entity, or more properly at that time, the DMT entity. He was not a tyke, or elf, or alien, but the spirit of the substance, a resplendent god, part South American indigenous deity, part futuristic machinic being, and he was angry. I had refused his gift, and possibly his woman, who bore the gift as well. He roared at me, infuriated by my disrespect and refusal to go along with the evening's planned entertainment. Within moments, I was subjected to what I can only think of as a magical attack. The DMT entity was breaking my reality into pieces, rapidly throwing things in my consciousness, and essentially toying with me, showing me what he could do. I was afraid, but in some way, I was also surprised by my ability to withstand the attack and to have enough control to not have to submit to the nightmare scenario. As my consciousness splintered in my mind, I was able to word a simple phrase of resistance: I don't care. This seemed to be the spell I needed to rob the DMT entity of his anger. He relented, and the attack stopped. If I didn't care, what was the point? Still, I felt his displeasure at my lack of respect and cooperation. As suddenly as it started, it was over. I was back in my room. Less than 5 minutes had passed, and I felt utterly drained, exhausted, disappointed, and confused. I seek insights from DMT. I seek beauty. I seek the otherworldly, the transcendent, the numinous. Instead, I was taken over by a hostile and superficial experience, threatened with my personalized ultimate nightmare, and subjected to magical attack. I checked myself and realized that overall, I felt okay. I had survived without much consequence. An avid pot smoker, my forgetting skills are sharply honed, and I decided not to let this trouble me much further. But still, I wondered if the DMT gods hate me. If I reject their gifts of nightmares, what can I expect from use of this substance in the future? I have been schooled that during a psychedelic trip, one needs to relax, let go, and experience whatever that substance has in store for you. I think this is generally good advice. Maybe if I had been willing to let myself experience the nightmare, it would have ended with an experience of transcendence. Maybe I lost a valuable opportunity to face my own fears and conquer them. However, this experience also showed me something about control. Having control is not necessarily a bad thing. I also, for the first time, understood intuitively the shamanic use of icaros during ayahuasca ceremonies. Icaros are just not songs, they direct the ayahuasca experience. Maybe I needed an icaro of my own, as this entire experience occurred in silence. In any case, I will be more careful of set and setting before my next high dose DMT experience.